Hello, thank you for joining Pearls of Wellness. My name is Deidre Johnson, and I'm the Executive Director for the Center for African American Health. Excited to be joined today by my friend Jeff Campbell, who is the Executive Director and founder of Emancipation Theater. I love that name. To start off with, why don't you give everybody a little background about who you are and how you founded the theater, or why?
Okay, well, thank you so much, Deidre, and it's an honor to be talking to you today on Pearls of Wisdom, Pearls of Wellness, I'm sorry. And Emancipation Theater began out of the idea that we need to amplify the stories of Black folks. We never get the stories told that need to be told. Take, for example, John Glenn and his expedition orbiting space. You know, we heard about John Glenn right away. There was a movie written about John Glenn right away. But fast forward to 2018 and we get Hidden Figures. And we get the story about the Black women and the mathematicians who navigated. Why did it take so long to tell that story? Don't you think Black women would have been excited and maybe even inspired to get into aerospace technology or the space program had they heard that story? And so that's what Emancipation Theater is really about, amplifying, celebrating, and elevating the stories of people of color. So the name really comes from that famous Marcus Garvey quote, "We must emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, for though others may free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind." We believe that storytelling frees the mind.
That's wonderful. How long have you been telling stories?
Well, you know, I've been performing, a performance artist in Denver, you know, for over 30 years. It's something that has been just a part of who I've been ever since the beginning. I came up in the rap game and I was literally selling cassette tapes out of the trunk of my car back in the day, just to give you context of how long I've been doing that. But then I got a little too old for hip hop and I wanted to shift my same skill set into performance art, live performing and writing. And, you know, writing a good verse is the same thing as writing a good monologue. And writing a good song is the same thing as writing a good scene. And writing a good album is the same thing as writing a good play. And so I just shifted my skill set into a different medium. And I've had some really tremendous success that I'm very proud of.
So one of the things, one of the reasons I invited you here today is I know you're really doing a lot around not just telling stories, but blending art and advocacy. How did that get started?
Well, I've always tried to create art that had some social, political, or spiritual consciousness attached to it. I just really am not interested in creating, you know, bubblegum type of art ever. I like to create things that, you know, provide some commentary, social commentary to the situations and the issues that the community and the culture faces. So I've always been doing that, but I also would always have a day job that would involve social justice or was social justice related. You know, I came up, you know, working with Brother Jeff and Brother Jeff's Cultural Center, also working for the Colorado Progressive Coalition. I work with them on bias policing and also parent organizing in Denver public schools.
Okay.
And so I've always been involved in that sort of thing as a day job. And then at night, I was always trying to do my art. But then when we got to Emancipation Theater, I really tried to blend the two because a lot of times artists will do a music video in front of a mural of, say, George Floyd or something. And it's not really being a part of the movement. It's kind of exploiting the movement in a way. Or sometimes they'll even use their platform to amplify, and that doesn't really last. But to do all of those things, along with raising money and to be a part of the fight, to be a part of the campaign, that's where it's at. And so that's kind of like what we like to do.
Is there something you can share of one of the things you're most proud of since you've been doing that blend?
Well, yeah, we mentioned Rivero Stinnett was a young brother who was assaulted at Union Station back in 2018, and he was left with permanent brain damage. He was assaulted by the security guards there who mistaken him for homeless. And they beat him unconscious, and he had a concussion and permanent brain damage. They caught the guys on camera, and the guys went to jail, but they just left Rivero high and dry with brain damage, and no compensation. Where he had to drop out of school from the Rocky Mountain School of College Art and Design, and he had to and he couldn't work. So he was really struggling. And so we launched a campaign called Justice for Rivero. And we rallied folks to go make public comment at the RTD district meetings, board meetings. And we ended it off with a play about Rivero called I Am Rivero. And we told the story with a production. And what that production did was it elevated his story in the news cycle. And once it elevated his story in the news cycle, people caught on and they started to rally behind him. And that is when the company, Allied Universal Security, then sent their doctor to examine him. And then they provided him a settlement. And now he has, a home, and he was able to receive fair compensation for the damage that was done.
Yes, so, as fair as it could get.
As fair as it could get, right. So
that's wonderful. What are some of the challenges that you face, not only in kind of blending arts and advocacy, but also as a theater?
Sure. Well, arts and advocacy in particular is a little dicey for the simple fact that not everybody wants to stick their neck out when it comes to social issues. A lot of folks are just trying to do art to have fun and express themselves, and they don't really want to rock the boat. And that's understandable, but I just wasn't built like that, and so sometimes it becomes hard to get folks to join in on the movement. And so, and people feel remorseful sometimes even after they did, because, hey, let's face it, if you do name and shame, if you do call out injustice, people are going to come after you. And so, I mean, my shoulders ain't that broad, but I'm down to shoulder that. But not everyone is, and it can get tough. So that's a big challenge as far as art and advocacy. And just as a theater, as an independent theater in town, in the grand theater landscape, there isn't a Black-owned playhouse in Denver, Colorado. There is a dance theater that is owned by Cleo Parker Robinson, and that is the only one. We've definitely partnered with them, but they're a dance theater, and their floor is far more important than the set design and the lighting design and stuff like that. So it becomes, we need our own equity playhouse, Black-owned equity playhouse in Denver, where actors and producers and directors can get paid equity wages, being a part of the Stage Actors Guild and things like that. We need that kind of thing to foster not only theater, but the television and film industry here in Colorado for people of color, because theater is the progenitor of those industries. And that's how you get an industry like film and television to thrive, is you have a repository of great actors and great directors and great writers right there, cutting their teeth by treading the boards, doing the live stuff, so that they can take the next step to go into film and television.
So I know you do a lot of your own original work. Is that challenging?
Yes, absolutely. So just like in the music industry, when you have a cover band, everybody wants to come out to see the cover band so they can hear their favorite songs. But then if the band plays all original songs, then people are a little skeptical, and it's hard to acclimate them into original material. The same is true for a playwright or a theater production company. If I was putting up Fences or Raisin in the Sun or things like that, it's a lot easier to sell tickets to something that's tried and true than it is to, Bobby Trombone, something that folks, have never heard of, and it hasn't been workshopped and tested out in the market. So it's definitely hard to get folks into original theater. So.
It's interesting because years ago, and I don't remember what play it was, I heard you being interviewed on the radio. And clearly the play was about our folks, our history, but the interviewer kept fixating on pig's feet. And I remember he kept asking you, well, do you eat pig's feet? And I loved your answer because it was, we're free now.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, does that happen to you a lot?
Yeah, media and the press is tough, especially in a place, Colorado, which is very homogenous, and they're just not ready for self-actualized Black folks to articulate themselves. They're just not ready for it. And yeah, that was for a play that we did called Recipe, and it was about the history of Denver through food, and it told different stories about food and food places. And I did a rendition of Brother Jeff's Cultural Center and Cafe, Fish, Fries, and Poetry. And yeah, that guy was asking me about pig's feet, and I said, we're free now, and we don't call it Emancipation Theater for nothing, and it's funny. And after that, boy, that bothered me so much. But then I just have to let that go because, the audience enjoyed it, and I got the message out there, and I got the story told beyond that. But that's always a challenge. The media has a way of just trying to look for a way to throw you off rather than pick you up. So it happens.
I think that happens whenever the topic is us, no matter what sector we're talking about. What are you working on these days?
Well, these days, I'm working on a Western. I am teamed up right now with the Black American West Museum, and we're going to tell a story about the 59ers, the Black pioneers that came here for the Pikes Peak Gold Rush. So you have some...
So 1859.
1859, okay. Not 1959, 1859. So you have, and it's really honestly a shared story. We talk about Chin-Lin Su, the Chinese American who was the father of the first Chinese-born person in Colorado. And we talk about his journey coming in originally to San Francisco from the railroad and making it here. And we talk about Horace and Augusta Tabor, of course, coming from Kansas into Colorado, becoming the Silver King, and then losing it all, falling in love with his, woman half his age and the whole scandal. But then we talk about some really powerful figures, Black folks that came. Two of them were Jeremiah Lee and Lorenzo Bowman, two cats that came from Missouri, and their story is just incredible, and it's so hard to find their history in the books. You got to look, you've really got to dig to find that history. But most of all, the protagonist, the lead character in the story is none other than Aunt Clara Brown. And her story of coming from Kansas by way of Kentucky, and then coming with a wagon train and feeding 26 men, cooking for them. But they didn't allow her to ride in the stage in any of the stage coaches. She had to walk the 700 miles.
Walk?
She had to walk the 700 miles along with them, and she would walk next to the oxen that carried the stage coaches. Sometimes she would lag behind. Sometimes she would get so far behind that they thought that they lost her. But lo and behold, that strong Black woman would just be stepping and singing gospel songs while she came, and she would catch up with them, and she made it. And so her story, just of her getting to Colorado, is a story into itself, let alone that she takes her skills of a laundry and a midwife and nurse and cook, and builds a fortune. She was actually washing laundry with, she was actually cleaning the clothes of the miners. And they were rude to her, nasty to her, but she had a system of marking and making sure that they got their clothes. But as she was cleaning in her wash tub, she saw that the water was glistening. So she took it out back behind her cabin, drained the water out, and at the bottom of her wash tub was gold dust. And she began to save that up. And after she saved it up, she started buying property in Central.
That is awesome.
In Central City, Idaho Springs, in Boulder, in Denver. She helped build the Methodist Church in Central City, and the one in Denver that's on Broadway that still stands today. She and even put money into the Catholic Church. And she gave all of her wealth away because, it wasn't about her accumulating. It wasn't about opulence for her. It was about benevolence. It was about people needed. And so why isn't that story told? That is an Oscar, that's movie of the year. So why isn't that being told? So, yeah, that's what I'm working on now.
So you're right. We never get to hear our stories told. And, so I grew up in Denver, went to school on the East Coast. And the number one joke was, there are Black people in Colorado? I thought the only color in Colorado was in the name.
Right.
And so I'd always push back on that. But we have been here doing things, inventing, you name it.
Right. Since day one. Since day one, we've been here, and it's always a challenge. I've heard that same joke probably a million times, and it was probably funny the first 500,000. But after a while, it just starts to get old. But I mean, we do that to ourselves. And so what has come out of that in Colorado is the Black folks have definitely kind of created like a bit of a identity complex. Like, we have to be like California or be like Chicago in order to prove ourselves. And that just isn't true. We've got a beautiful, glorious history, and we should celebrate it. And so that's part of what, Emancipation Theater's mission is to do. Colorado Black history brought to life on stage.
And there was another one you'd mentioned before, which had to do with the Black men who actually came up with the technology for the mining.
Right, Lorenzo Bowman. So he had worked in Missouri on a plantation, and he did the, what's it called, where they extract the ore from the rock. It's called, the process is slipping my mind. But he had done that. And Jeremiah Lee was actually a 49er. So he was in California during their gold rush. So he had learned about prospecting for gold, what to look for in the water, to watch how the water slowed down, to see how deep it went, to look at the color of the rocks on the surface. He understood all of that. So they were the perfect team. And they built the red, white, and blue mining company out there. And so they were the perfect team. And they called Lorenzo Bowman the professor because for years, he was the only one in town in the state of Colorado who knew how to do that process. it's just amazing what we've been able to do in spite of all of the exclusion and rejection and exploitation. So these stories have to be told.
So, what advice would you give a young person who wants to make sure stories are told and wants to really make a career of what you've been doing?
Yeah, embrace history. One thing that I've seen with young folks these days is that they are ashamed of the history and where we come from, and I don't want to hear about another slave movie. And yeah, I can see where that is coming from, and that makes a lot of sense. But we come from greatness. I don't even see them as in movies in that context. I see them as movies of triumph over extreme obstacles. We've paid a higher price for freedom. Mathematicians, sociologists, and historians will agree with me that 1865 is greater than 1776.
And plus, that wasn't where we started. They'd like to start our story there
Right.
rather than going back thousands of years.
Right, right, right. So I think embracing history and delving into that, because there's so many jewels, so many things that be told about ourselves. Knowledge of self is the most powerful thing. To know thyself, and to thyself be true. That is the most powerful thing. And then also study your craft, study the history of the craft. If you want to be an actor or a playwright or a screenwriter, study the craft. The craft, it's not impossible to do. You can do it. You've got all of the attributes that everyone else has. There's no reason why you can't do it. So believe in yourself, but also study. People always ask me, "Hey, I want to learn how to do what you do. How did you learn how to do?" Well, I went to the bookstore and I bought a book, How to Write a Play. I went there. Everything that we want to do is in a book. And if you're just willing to do the work that it takes, you can make your dreams come true.
That's wonderful. What are so I know you're working on the current play.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for how Emancipation Theater will grow?
I hope that Emancipation Theater grows by being able to provide our presence in the community as a network and a catalyst for community building for not just artists, but all organizations and companies that seek to engage in the Black community. So from education to criminal justice to economics and, of course, health, there's all of those stories that need to be told. And there's all these organizations and companies that can benefit from gathering community to share stories. So I see us being a catalyst and a through line to all of the things, the social issues and the social pillars that can transform the conditions that we see repetitive within our community. We've developed some bad cultural habits, but within our community, all of the attributes are there. We as a people have climbed to the highest ranks of military. We have climbed to the highest laboratories of science and medicine. We've climbed to the highest offices of business and industry. There is no reason why those who have learned to swim in the ocean of capitalism can't go back to the community and teach others how to swim. And how do we do that? First, by sharing those stories. And so I think that's why Emancipation Theater and just storytelling in general is so important.
That was great. Okay. So out of curiosity, so I know you're based in Denver. Do you ever work on projects with other theaters in other communities outside of Colorado?
The last time I did that was Texas. I went to Texas and we brought my one man show to Texas. And that was a lot of fun. And I've also, I sold a script that I wrote to a production company in Atlanta. But I tell you, I have trepidation of ever doing that again, just because the way that the production came out, it just did a disservice to my work. So I'm kind of guarded about my art, and my hopes are that there could be Emancipation Theater Oklahoma City, Emancipation Theater Omaha, Nebraska, that there could be different emancipation theaters across the country that could share their stories of their Black history from their state and their cities, because all over the country there are stories to be told, like the stories I'm telling about Clara Brown. There are plenty of stories that can be told, Oklahoma and Bill Pickett. There's just all these stories all over the country, and I would love to go and set up camp with some artists somewhere else and help them tell their Black history on stage in other places. So that is definitely the hope, and the vision is to build this nationwide network of emancipators.
That's wonderful. Because it's one thing to read about it. That's if it's even written about accurately, but another to see it brought to life through the lens of someone with a heart and soul for the community.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that sort of thing can foster change. It can really bring community together, and people can start thinking about solutions. It can inspire action. So much comes from the inspiration of, wow, we did that. I didn't know we did that. Wow, we're cowboys too. I didn't know we were cowboys too. Wow, we created jazz? I didn't know we created jazz. Not only did we create it, but we made it so prolific, and pervasive all throughout the society. Is like, back then it was seen as gangster music, and now you can get a PhD in jazz theory. So there's so much to be told, so much richness in our history and in the stories. So it's just a powerful mechanism for change.
So earlier you shared Rivero's story. Are there other advocacy topics in your sights to tackle?
Yes, I'm working on, I have some A story sketched out about co-ops and a cooperative business called Emancipation Cafe, where the community owns the cafe. Well, it starts off with the protagonist struggling by himself, doing the inventory, doing the scheduling, doing the payroll, and doing the training, and trying to keep everything going. And then, he gets the idea to spread out the ownership within the cafe, and then the cafe begins to sustain. And I thought that it would be a way to introduce the idea about cooperative economics and cooperative business to the community in that way. So that is one of the things that I'm working on. And of course, the Clara Brown story, the city, Central City, is working on a Aunt Clara Brown Day. So her current historical marker in Central City is riddled with bullet holes. But in addition to that, the very first sentence is, unlike most pioneers, Clara already received her bonanza before making it to Colorado, her freedom. So it is if to say, right on the historical marker, it is if to say that her inherent right of self-determination is the equivalent of a white man striking gold and getting rich.
Wow.
And that's right there. And how did that happen? How did
Who wrote that?
Who wrote that? Right? And this is the thing about us owning our story. So I am launching a campaign to get her historical marker rededicated and rewritten. And I'm volunteering to do that writing. So we got to do right by Aunt Clara.
Yeah. On her behalf, thank you.
Right.
That's amazing. So, yeah, her reward was just being free.
Right.
And by the way, she did the following.
Right.
And I love how you share what you're planning to do around cooperative economics. Because I think there's so many concepts that people may hear or kind of be curious about, but that really brings it to life.
Yeah. I did do a campaign with a music video and a documentary about people experiencing homelessness during the pandemic. And again, that brought a lot of controversy and a lot of opposition and people who were pro the urban camping ban and felt like I had really disrespected the mayor and his administration. But I was only amplifying the actual stories of people who were living on the street. And they had nowhere to wash their hands, and they had nowhere to
In COVID.
during COVID, and nowhere to use the restroom, nowhere for feminine hygiene, and instead of providing hand washing stations or trash receptacles, they were simply being moved from one block to the other while they cleaned up that block, and then they would mess up the other block, and then they would push them back and forth, and nothing tangible was really happening. So we again elevated that story in the news cycle, and it is on record that the former mayoral administration spent a record number of dollars towards resolving the homeless issue. I'm not saying that we were 100% responsible for it, but we did amplify the story. We did elevate the story in the news cycle by merging art along with the activism. We were basically the narrative strategists for Denver Homeless Out Loud, which was the organizing, boots on the ground organization that was doing the grassroots work. I don't want to overshadow their work in any way. All we were there to do is to raise the profile of the work that they were doing. So,
And I feel like the common thread when you talk about raising profile is reminding people about the humanity of others.
right.
Because I think that, people may claim that's not the case, but when you stop seeing someone as human as you are, which often happens to us,
Right.
because my belief and experience has been we always keep others in mind, but we don't get that same acknowledgement of our own humanity back. And so once you start sharing the story that this really is a human this is happening to, that at least gives people pause.
Yes, absolutely. At the end of the day, so many people that are, living on the street, surviving on the street, have fallen on financial hardships that, were not of their decision making, or a lot of women that were on the street that were fleeing a domestic violence issue, a brutal issue by their spouses or significant others. Or there are people who are struggling with mental health issues or even substance issues that have moved beyond their control. And I think that if we were to just see, these folks are not their substance issue, they're not their mental health issue, that they are people that are experiencing that, then we start to look at it in a different light. We get caught up in our day-to-day, in our car, in our car payment, in our house and our mortgage, that, we begin to take more pride or more value in our property than than our fellow human being, than people. And we've got to shift the narrative from, property over people into people over property. So I often think about, arts and culture being such an important part of our community, and how we see that and playing a role in the education, advocacy, and healing of our community. Just to share your story, is a healing act. A lot of times when we gather folks together and we have our open forums, and they wind up going off topic, or they wind up just talking to be talking, and they'll say things like, I lost my train of thought. I don't know where I was going with this. I don't know the point I was making, or sorry, I'm just rambling. It's because they're not really sharing their story. They're in the moment expressing their inherent need to be heard. Mm-hmm. We as human beings, we need to feel heard. We need to feel understand. We need to feel seen. And then you walk away from that experience like, I should have said this, or I should have said that. So I want to start, offering storytelling workshops and forums and open forums, open town halls to just regular old community members, just folks, who want to have that opportunity. And we can look at the basic fundamentals of storytelling. We can give them, the basic framework for telling a story. But we also have to teach folks how to listen. Mm-hmm. We also got to teach folks how to listen. If you learn how to listen, then you begin to ask better questions. And then that then puts people back on the train of thought so that they can really get their point across for what they're trying to say. When I think about the work that you do, I think about, our seniors, our older community members, and we live in this world dominated by narratives. And so how do we shift that narrative of a fear of aging into fearlessness? Because it should be a privilege to be called an elder. It should be an honor to reach into your senior years. But often we wind up aging into poverty, aging into complications with our health. And so I just, want to find ways for us to shift that narrative that of fearless longevity of life. I don't have the answer, but that's one of the things that I think about often.
When you think about our stories never get told, and when I hear you ask that question, I think that's a very American dynamic of not caring for or treasuring elders. Because when you look at where most of us came from, that's not the culture.
Right.
And even in other cultures, becoming an elder is revered, you're taken care of. And so part of it is, how do you carve that out in this system that has no love for us? How can we love for each other?
Right. They have the blue zones where folks are the highest number of centurions mm-hmm. within their communities. And a lot of the traits are the same, is folks, is the family is taking care of the seniors as they get older. They're taking care of the elders. And there's a lot of other, things to do with diet and just culture in general. But just want to get to a place of celebration because, mm-hmm. hey, I'm not getting any younger. So, yeah.
I had an opportunity to go to Egypt earlier this year, and we spent some time with the Nubian community. Mm. And what was so wonderful about it was we visited a home, and everybody lived in this house. So it was multi-generation. And they were explaining that once the family got too big, they would all move to another compound. It wasn't, you take your cluster of the family and go somewhere else. No, we all stay together and move together.
Right.
And I think, like we were talking about earlier, the American model is very individualistic. When you think about how many of us got here, and if you're chattel, who knows where your parents are, who knows where your children are, it just shattered everything that culturally was our inheritance. And so now, how do you heal from that, try to weave something new together?
Oh, yeah. That rugged individualism is such a part of the American narrative, along with a bunch of other myths.
Yeah, because rugged individualism on a bedrock of white supremacy
Yeah.
is a very different story.
Absolutely. And that rugged individualism, although other folks have been indoctrinated, programmed, and conditioned to repeat it, they don't even benefit from it the way those, the high level capitalists actually benefit from that. They're the ones living a not so rugged individualism, in the big house, while you folks have been indoctrinated to believe in it, and you'll look down on your fellow man when they're talking about they need a help up or a step up. But you're because you're struggling yourself, and if we had a rugged collectivism, then we could reach out and take care of one another, and none of us would be suffering to the degree that we are with the amount of wealth that exists within this society. So it's really about shifting those narratives for me, and that's why these stories I'm so passionate about.
Oh yeah, because hunger doesn't have to exist. Homelessness doesn't have to exist. We go to other countries and those things actually don't exist.
Right.
So it's that choice.
Right. But stand up and pledge allegiance. This is the best country on earth, and manifest destiny. We don't apologize for the conquest, colonialism, and imperialism that we've imposed on these people on this planet. And oh no, now we're all dying. What do? Now we're looking to indigenous wisdom. Now we're looking to folks, psychedelics are healing people, or helping veterans with PTSD. Now we're using the medicinal properties of cannabis. All of these things are happening. And slowly there is beginning a shift in the narratives of things that were just so criminalized and exploited. Now we're beginning to see things from another perspective and say, hey, we've got to do something, because if we don't, the empire is going to fall. So, as an artist, I want to be able to plug into the work that you're doing. And I would like to bring other musicians and writers and performers to directly plug into some of the work that you're doing with the center and with Pearls of Wellness. So how can we do that?
Well, when I think about the work that you and I have been doing for the past couple of years, kind of integrating narrative in community engagement, I think that's the first step.
Right.
And really it's just for us to brainstorm what could come next. I think one of the things that really resonated with me that you said is we have to make sure we're bold, because it's so easy to feel comfortable and not make waves. When people don't realize that feeling of comfort is a lie.
Right.
So let that go.
Right.
And so that's why I appreciate you kind of speaking the truth. I try to do the same, and I think that's why we work well together.
Yeah.
And so we'll just continue to look for ways to do that, because something's always going to happen.
Absolutely.
But thank you for joining me today. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm looking forward to the next play, because I'll be attending. And thank you for all that you do, not only to shine the light on injustices, but to help people find their own healing path through getting that story out.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jeff Campbell, founder of Emancipation Theater. You know, when most of us hear the term emancipation, we think of it as some historical term, something that's already been achieved, when the truth is, it hasn't. And I challenge each one of us to think about, how are we not emancipated in different areas of our life? And what can we do, both for our family, as an individual, and as our community, to truly become emancipated? This is Pearls of Wellness, and I'm your host, Deidre Johnson. Thank you to our sponsor at Colorado Housing and Finance Authority.